love. We all need it. Give love. MC.
Hello, friends. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. And welcome to Art of Love Radio. I'm your host, Ashley Davine. And wow, first of all, what an awesome intro track that is. I want to give a shout out to the creator of that, which is Daniel Tyler Ponte. And you can actually find the song Give Love, our intro track, at www.fullmoonrisingmusic.com. So welcome to the show today. We have a really awesome topic, and it is the economic breath. We're going to be taking spirituality and art and really kind of weaving that together with economics and finance. We have a really special guest co-host in the house to get activated with us on this topic. He is a self-initiated law merchant who actively works through an entity called Heroes Merchants, which he co-founded with his brother Matthew to promote methods of achieving a prosperous civic virtue with the people of our world. Please welcome Zachary James Corzine. Are you with us, Zach?
Ashley, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Okay, so we love the energy. Zach is just so fluid and so knowledgeable and just really in tune on this topic. So I'm excited for what we're going to share with you guys today. But first, I want to start how we always start Art of Love Radio, to really bring us into a conversation with our hearts. So we're wanting you guys to really take away from this whatever best suits you, whatever feels right to you, and toss out the rest. So what we're going to do is just close our eyes if we can. Of course, if we're driving or flying, etc., we don't want to do that. But if we can close our eyes, and everybody just take a nice deep inhale through the nose, breathing in all that life breath and really letting go of anything not serving you, and holding, and then exhale through the mouth. Just really release any tension, any stress, anything keeping you in perfect alignment with love. So we're going to just take one last breath together now. Inhale through the nose. Holding, releasing, feeling that warm golden light surrounding you. And we're just going to exhale through the mouth. Push it all out. And now just really feel yourself present in your heart. And I love that we started this way, and we always do, but just will ease us right into our topic that Zach and I are going to talk about today, the economic breath. I'm going to let Zach kind of run here, but I just want to start by saying that Zach really broke it down to me in a great analogy about the ebb and flow of life and really working through the breath. And I personally feel like the breath is our most intimate relationship that we'll ever have. It's our start point, it's our end point, and it really connects us with everything in our world. So in remembering that everything outside of us is a fractal projection of everything inside of us, then we can really use that to harmonize these fractals in a way that brings us into a space where we're really creating our world. And that's the point that Zach brought up. And I want to allow you now, Zach, to run with that concept of the breath and the fractal projection, etc.
Sure, thank you. So the idea of this projection, or this idea that everything inside of us is a reflection or projection of everything outside of us, is basically like saying as above, so below, as within, so without. And it's also, in scientific terms, it's the macrocosm and microcosm. And so one thing that we can do is kind of recognize that our body or our spirit is kind of made up from a bunch of individual little pieces, and like on a scientific perspective again, or a biological perspective, we can say these are the cells in our body, that each one of our cells are actually conscious, and at some point in time, probably around our conception and birth, that these cells decided to pledge their individual spirits all together to make one new unified spirit, and that unified spirit, when it made birth, that's what basically is man and woman, or me and you. And so if we look at that in that perspective, we say the microcosm is the cell, and then the macrocosm would be me, the body of man or the body of woman. And so then if we look at it from another perspective and we look at all the different men and women out there, and boys and girls, we have another perspective of the microcosm. We have a bunch of individual spirits that are individually driven, and we have this idea that we're all part of one whole. We're all part of the same thing. It's kind of like a paradox where we are individual, but we are also one at the same time. And so there's this idea where all of us came together in community over the years, and we decided that we wanted to pledge our individual spirits, though we realized that our individual goals were important, that our prime individual goal was to make sure that we served the greater good. And in serving the greater good, we kind of pledged ourselves or our spirits to a community or an idea. And sometimes we call these ideas states of consciousness or states. Other words for it are cities, nations, communities. And in essence, we actually we now become the cells, and we pledge ourselves to a new body, and that body becomes a new union. And it's got all types of different names. We can call it, a one world government. We can call it the United Nations. On other levels, we can call it the United States or state of California. So in looking at the perspective of the macro and the micro, or as above, so below, or the inner world and the external world, they're always in harmony. Each of those pieces are in harmony with themselves. But what we're looking to do is to recognize how they are harmonized with one another. In doing so, we can maybe gain a better understanding of how to work with the system that we presently find ourselves in, and I guess we would just call that civilization.
Wow, that's so interesting.
So so now there's this idea of how communication takes place between the microcosm and the macrocosm, and what is actually being exchanged. If we go back to our body, we say, how does my body communicate with itself? We say, well, we have, this circulatory system, we have the blood, and there's an exchange of oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood. We have the nervous system, which is, very electronic perspective of exchange, where we have charging and discharging of energy or of activity. And then, the kind of the central regulator of exchange to me is the breath. And that's kind of how we communicate with our external world and with the plants. It's like we inhale what the plants don't need, or what they exhale, and then when we exhale, the plants need. So it forms this symbiotic relationship. And I come from a biological and chemistry perspective. I majored in evolutionary and organismal biology and minored in chemistry. And about 4.5 years ago, I got into these other arts of law, finance, and government, which is almost like the same thing. And I started seeing the natural order of things that exists within our commercial system, and actually saw the harmony. And before, it wasn't always that way. It was more, I was seeing how it wasn't what I wanted and what I could do to change it. And I think a lot of us get into that position, and a lot of times, we don't view the civilization or this idea of the laws of the civilization, which is basically the customs of how the individual interacts with society as a whole, that unified spirit. We don't, a lot of us may not have realized that that's an actual art form that is thriving, that has always been thriving. So
yeah, I love that. I love that, Zach, and I love what you're saying, and I just want to kind of hop in here and feel if I'm getting this right and I'm understanding, because as you're speaking about this, a picture is forming in my mind of almost like a puzzle. And so it's we're each these individual parts, and we have these individual aspects, and yet we're all, of the whole, and we all kind of fit in this, really beautiful and harmonic order and vibration. So what I'm kind of feeling, like you're saying, what I'm feeling from this is that when we come into alignment with that vision of it, that perspective, if you will, we can kind of look down. So I feel like that takes us sort of up, and we're on the mountain now, and he's bringing us on this vision quest of really this beautiful way that our world kind of works, and helping us to come into a vibrational alignment with that. So I'm feeling like if we remember that everything around us is within us, and so it all broke it down for us, starts within, and with our circulatory system, remembering that we have that same connection with the plants and the animals and things like that, then we can really come into tune with things that could really be scary. Like you said, where we're looking at something and we're like, okay, this is so horrible because we've had this memory of it, we've had this experience with it, and the experience that I felt disempowering. But not necessarily because it was that way, but because of how we were viewing it or where we were standing on the board. So I love how you talk about, bringing that empowered space with you to the table. Like you were talking to me the other night about flags and symbols and things like that. So what are some ways, and just let me know if you feel like I'm on, the same wavelength with this. And also maybe how we can really continue on with what you're talking about to empower ourselves.
Well, one thing is we can just reach a basic idea of what is communication. Communication is an exchange of information. And there's that saying, I think, that a very large amount of communication is nonverbal. Right? It's like body language, and it's like things that we can't see. But there is a portion of language that a lot of us are focused on, and it's what we're doing right now. It's by using symbols. We're basically taking these symbols, which we call letters, and we put them in certain orders, which we make up, which we call words, and then we kind of make a format for how those words relate to one another, and that comprises our language. And so, the communication of ideas is kind of carried through the idea of language, and that's like a worldwide thing that we all do. And there's another term though for communication that is kind of you could say on a more material level, but it practically means the same thing, and that is this word called commerce. And if we break down the word commerce, we have a prefix, which is C-O-M, which means with or together. And then we have merce, which means mercy or grace. There's this idea of commerce basically is the exchange of something of value, whether tangible or intangible, from one position to another, and for value, to say that is valuable. And a lot of times, in the money world, we think when we think of value, we may think of money, but really value is just anything that can be measured in numbers, that isn't a complete balance. Because when we're at complete balance and zero, there almost is no number. So as soon as we start performing an activity and we're expending energy, all of a sudden there's this idea of giving value. And if there's energy that's coming to us that we're absorbing, that we're receiving value. So this is constantly going on. This is what the breath is. This is what how we nurture our body, and this is also how we nurture the body of the people. But when we enter into civil society, and we take all these pieces of man and woman, and we pledge them all together and form this new whole. This whole is completely created out of symbols. And so a simple word to call this new entity is that it's a fictional entity, because it's based on a very material level of communication. And there's a lot of argument as to like certain symbols are more or less fictitious than others. Some people will say like that, like your social security card, that represents a fictitious person, but that's not you. You're something else. But really, if we aren't, if we're entering into the realm of symbols, it's all kind of representations of the truth, which really there is no word to describe because it's perfect. And we can call it God, we can call it love, but really every time we use a symbol to represent that idea, that's what you get, is a representation of that holy thing, that is undescribable.
Wow.
So, thank you. So from there, it's like, what is the way in which, in civil society, in which we communicate the exchange of value on the most formal level. And just think about that word for a second. When we think formal, we think like tradition. We think like, like manners. We think about elegance and honor and things of that nature. And so what is the most, but we also think about that it's with form. And that's where we kind of enter into the idea that we take these symbols and we put them on a piece of paper, and now that piece of paper is charged with the idea that those symbols are supposed to represent, and we pass it around and we say that we gave something of value. So it's like we enter into this world of the money system, which is basically a global card game that everybody's playing. Even if we hate it, most of us are still playing the game.
Right.
And that to me is the formal representation of the breadth of our economy. If you have constant pieces of paper coming in and going out, it's almost like you are helping to regulate the exchange of value and keeping the economy moving. We know that the economy can't do very well when the exchange isn't abundant. And that's kind of like saying that the economy is suffocating. And maybe a lot of us, you can do like a self-analysis of yourself for the people who are listening, and ask yourself, like, how is my breadth? How is the economic breadth of my finances? Like, am I able to just like receive value and give value, and like any idea that comes in my head where I want to like manifest an idea, then I'm easily able to do that with this tool that we have of communicating value through symbols on pieces of paper? Or do you feel like it's more like a suffocation? Like you're like trying to like receive these pieces of paper, these certain pieces of paper, and then all of a sudden like rent's due at the end of the month, or your car payment's due, and you just made a huge breath out, and now all of a sudden you gotta like start sucking in and trying to find those oxygen molecules of breath, and it almost seems like if we don't have our finances in order, then our relationship with society, it's kind of suffocating in a way. And so what we're looking to do is to explore how we can alleviate that and make our economic breath match the breath that we have, for our body. That it's basically like we don't even need to be conscious of it, or we aren't conscious of it for a lot of the time, even though maybe we remind ourselves to be conscious of it. But it's basically like this ebb and flow, back and forth with ease and grace. So I guess the question to pose is how do we go about doing that?
Yeah, I love that. And it's beautiful because as you're, talking about the flow and the breath, I'm here and I'm just kind of tapping into my breath and really, listening, and the wind is blowing, and so I'm really getting to experience on a very tangible level that exact, analogy that you're speaking within me and within the natural world. So what I'm seeing is, as people come into the rhythm of their heart, and just how we started with breathing, if you remember that everything inside of yourself, and like Beth was saying with the fractal, fractal projection within, without, if you remember that it starts in your breath, how empowering is that? And how much of a space of empowerment that brings to the table the next time you are at the bank, or you are going to pay bills, or alleviating that suffocation, like Beth was saying, alleviating that tension, really remembering that you have that power as this beautiful creator, this king, this queen of your reality, and you can breathe deeper, and you can exhale more fully, and that is naturally going to begin to bring you into alignment with these contracts. And then remembering, how you are exchanging them and how you're feeling about those. And then every time you get a negative thought as a creator, as a painter, you can change that. You can whip, that black into some red paint and draw heart and make love. And so I love where we're headed with this, Zach. And we're coming to sort of the end of the show, but we've got enough time for you to discuss one more fun thing with us. So if you want to kind of run with how to incorporate the power of those words and things like that for us, that would be wonderful.
Sure. One of the big explorations that I've made and a lot of friends have made over the years is that, when we analyze the breadth of the economy and our position in it, one thing to look at is how you're utilizing the resources you have. Now, most of us, when we receive some pieces of paper that are of value, we don't recognize the value in them. So when we all receive Federal Reserve notes, which is those dollar bills you have in your pocket, we know exactly what to do with those. And those are definitely an important piece in the card game that we're playing with one another. But there's these other cards that we're all using. And we may not be tapping into the energy or the value that they actually hold. And the pieces of paper I'm talking about here are bills, bank statements, receipts, and contracts, and things of that nature. And that maybe if we had a better understanding of how those cards worked, and then maybe we would be able to play the commercial game a little bit better, and it would help us breathe a little bit better, and it would help, you know, our families and our friends and the economy breathe a little bit better, because we have stuff that's constantly moving. And so, for instance, just ask yourself, do I have like a stack of pieces of paper or bills sitting somewhere? They come in and they sit there and just collect in a pile. And so I want you to think for one moment, just think for one moment that those are resources right there. Those are resources that you can use for investment. And I'm going to give everybody the key word to look into, and it's actually a very spiritual word. But these pieces of paper are sitting there, like, you know, in a pile, and they're not doing anything. So it's kind of like a form of energy that's not being utilized, and you're almost like you're not utilizing a resource. And so because you're not utilizing a resource in the financial game, then as a result of it, you're not going to play that game very well. It's just like any other game. If you have a very limited understanding of the rules of the game, then you're not going to be aware of all the things that can be done with the cards that, you know, comprise that game. So there's this idea that we call acceptance. And this is something that I'd like everybody to look into on their own. And if we just kind of go from a Buddhist philosophy, or anybody who's experienced, you know, the idea of meditation and sitting in one place for an extended period of time, there's a lot of challenges that come your way. And often, you know, there's a little bit of advice, you know, that is granted by gurus and, you know, a lot of like scriptures, is that, you know, is this state of unconditional acceptance of what is. And when you do that, you're actually able to digest any of those energies that are going through your body, and you're able to become, you know, enlightened, or kind of transcend the, you know, dense vibration that you may be holding. Wow. So this idea of acceptance, believe it or not, was actually one of the reasons for the creation of the Federal Reserve Act, was to push the idea of accepting your bills. That when they come to you, and actually utilizing an accepted bill for investment purposes, and by the time your bill becomes due, you'll actually have the money to pay it based on your utilization of the energy that you were given with the bill. And that, you know, yeah, it may sound like a little complicated, but just kind of look into that idea of acceptance, or we call it accepting a draft, which again is another word. It just so happens to be, in etymology, it happens to be another word for breath. If you actually look at kind of like a chain of words, you'll see that a draft will kind of lead you to, I think, like a phantasm, and then the phantasm will end up leading you to the breath. So when I'm accepting a draft, I'm actually kind of taking in a breath from somebody else. You know, like maybe if you were to issue me a draft, it's like you just breathe. Well, I have to accept and adopt your breath as the law of God. And in doing that, I inherit some form of empowerment. And with that empowerment, I'm able to now give back to you in return the equal value that you gave to me. And so it's kind of like a... Thank you. It's like a very spiritual perspective of something that we may not look at as being coming from a state of, you know, awareness. You know, sometimes we think of like those greedy bankers, and like, you know, they're very like narrow-minded and logic-minded, and they don't, you know, they're the ones who messed up the system. But if we just kind of start pointing the finger, we kind of can come back home and realize that, you know, we're the source of it all, and that this is a child's game. We're in heaven, this is a child's game, and if we just view the game as a child would, well, then we're going to receive the joy and the benefits just as a child would playing with, an action figure or, some silly piece of plastic figure or something like that, because our imagination now has been focused on those things which it was not focused on before.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, Zach, and very well said. And, that's one of the reasons why I was so excited to have Zach on the show today and, just to continue, progressing collaboratively in the future and, as we go through this beautiful adventure that is life. Because, there's this really holistic and this really spiritual aspect to life and to what we do. And there is a natural vibration, rhythm, and cycle. There is divine synchronicity and bliss. And you can align yourself with the vortex and, be in complete love. But it also takes action, and we are also in human form. And so there's this real, I'm not saying problem, but challenge happening right now where we're not in vibrational match to the economy that we desire. And, like Zach said, we have that tendency to point the finger, but that's 1 out, 3 back at you, because what, Zach actually said this to me, what is society is not a reflection of, your own heart, So we have to, or it would serve us to start really tapping into that and breathing into our own hearts and really taking responsibility as creators and thinking about what vibrational match we are giving to these bills that we receive and to the way that we view things to create them and allowing it to empower us. And, I really invite you to just continue to follow what Zach's doing and, stay up to date with what it is to really start to anchor these concepts within your daily life to really use it to space to bring you into empowerment and that collectively, as a whole, we move into a space of more matched vibrational alignment. Is there anything else that you want to we have a couple minutes left, Zach, and then I'm going to, do the closing here, but is there anything else that you want to leave us and impart us with that you feel?
Yeah, sure. If for some of those who are hearing this message and they want to know, well, where do I go from here? You said this idea of acceptance, what do I do? I would say that, just remember that the source, the foundation, that is when you enter into these subjects, and the main 3 subjects for me is finance, law, and governance, and that's within me as well as without me. And where the starting basis is really in the Word and the power of Word. And so the best way to start for me would be to go to this place called etymonline.com, which is basically a search engine for words. And ETYM is an abbreviation for etymology, which means the study of the origin of words, of where the word comes from. And in doing that, we gain a wider perspective of what the symbol of word means. Because a lot of times we come across a word, and because of our understanding of what that word means, we reach a certain conclusion. But if we had a more expanded understanding of that word, we'd realize that our conclusion is very optional. And a lot of times I say that the symbol is, each symbol has its own spirit. And if you get to know that spirit, if you become friends with it, then you guys will be good friends. You'll be able to utilize that symbol, and it'll be an asset to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Sorry to cut you off, but we have 60 seconds. I love that so much, and I totally believe in what you do in your work. So grateful to have you here today, friends. Please be sure to link and connect with Zachary at www.orderofmerchants.com. And on Facebook, you can search Order of Merchants, and I'll be posting this as well on the events page, so you guys will be able to link in with him. Link in with me at facebook.com/AfterDating11. Just always remember to connect back into your heart, that you can always come into this conversation. Love is always available to you. Thank you so much for being here, Zach. I really appreciate your message and your energy, and sorry to cut it short there, but we love everything you're doing. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in.
Thanks so much for having me. Look forward to talking again.
All right, friends, have a wonderful, wonderful day, and breathe into this. Take what fits with you, throw out the rest. Remember, this is an art class. There is no right or wrong answer. All it is love. And thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.